Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello and a warm welcome to our guests around the world. It might be good morning, good evening, good night to those of you watching. Great to have you. I hope you've been enjoying the very stimulating conversations we've been having with some great guests. And today is no less. We have the very insightful, the expert, Dr. Kathryn Kissell with us, and we're really looking forward to that conversation. Welcome, Kathryn.
Well, it's lovely to be here.
Great to have you and really looking forward to the discussion. But shall we do the usual?
Let us do the usual. We always like to give a proper introduction so people know just who we're speaking with. So let me do that here now. So Dr. Kathryn Kissell is a highly qualified and experienced Chartered Counselling Psychologist, parent coach, and executive coach. Her extensive clinical experience includes the NHS, that's the National Health Service for those who are overseas and outside of the UK, National Health Service in the UK, charity sector and workplace settings, including launching the first on-site counselling service for His Majesty's Prison Service employees in England. She currently runs a private practice on Harley Street, London, and has recently launched the Team Brain Partnership, an organization which aims to revolutionize the way organizations activate team performance. So Dr. Kissell is recognized as the UK expert in Bowen Systems, and we'll be talking a bit about that as we go, an evidence-based psychological approach which understands human flourishing through our embeddedness in relationships. Topic close to our hearts. The mental health, well-being, and effective parent or team leadership is unlocked through the transformation of relationship dynamics and the maturing of self-confidence and secure self-esteem. Her doctoral research explored the impact of Bowen Systems on burnout in the clergy, and she continues to develop this field as an associate tutor at Ridley Hall, Cambridge. Fascinating background.
There's so many bits in there that we just want to jump into, Kathryn, but I think that the best thing to do is maybe start with a little bit of context. What's the background that got you interested in all things relational and relationship systems and dynamics and so on? And then we can venture off into some of the other things that you've picked out there. What's driving the passion?
Oh, wow. Well, that started back in 2011. So my husband and I, way back in the midst of time, before I was a psychologist, I was a vicar's wife. I still am a vicar's wife, but back then I worked in the church with my husband, and we'd just been running his first church. So it was quite fresh-faced into church leadership, and we'd been running this church together for 6 years. And to be honest, it was a bit of a disaster.
Wow.
We had taken on quite a sizable church, but the leader before had to step down. There'd been some quite significant problems, and he'd been asked to leave. And we had taken on the post. We thought it was an amazing church. We thought there were great activities that were going on. We were excited to be a part of it. And we naively thought that the problems that had happened previously were just in the past. That was him.
Go with the previous vicar.
Yeah, it's all gone. And so we arrived and we just kind of looked towards the future. But what happened over the next 6 years was, well, just entirely knocked us off our feet. Very quickly, we found ourselves overwhelmed by people being furious at us, angry at us. My husband was threatened with violence.
Wow.
We had huge chasms break up in the church community, great rifts, people leaving, and a lot of discontent, and kind of all got a little bit much. And we began to realize that, oh gosh, this has got to be, something going on because of the unsettled from the past. So we did what we thought we should do to try and help people settle. but it was incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of thought we were going somewhere, and we thought we were building, and the church was growing, and it felt like, okay, yeah, we're doing all the right things. Lots of exciting things were happening. But then all of a sudden, someone who was basically our best friend, closest to us in the church, working alongside my husband, suddenly announced that behind the scenes, he was planning to start another church just down the road.
My goodness, just down the road as well.
Just down the road, and took half the church with him. And we thought we were getting somewhere. We'd inherited this church. We realized it was in pain. We thought we were doing the right things, but then all of a sudden, it just exploded.
Yeah.
And at that point, 2011, it broke us. You know, both of us had absolute burnouts. We had 2 young children, aged 1 and 3, and we both quit. We said, you know what, we're done. This is too much.
I mean, relationships are challenging enough, but relationships in in the church environment where you're just so vulnerable, you're so emotionally invested in what you're doing. Yeah, I get that.
It's intense. And you and I both know that I always think people that work in the church have the most difficult relationship dynamics of any organization or business or workplace. Because like you say, it's so many different types of relationships that you have in that world. So it's really intense.
Massive expectations of what behaviors should be, the standards of behavior.
Really high standards of behavior, but terribly low behavior as well. I mean, my goodness, people can really misbehave.
You've got a pipeline to God. You've got to be able to get this stuff right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's terribly full of humans, isn't it?
Exactly.
So we quit. We ended up, because of the way things were, it made us homeless. We both lost our jobs. All our stuff was put into storage for 2 years. We traveled with 2 children in a car, and we realized later on that we were known as homeless. You know, we were sofa surfing, going from house to house, not knowing what we were going to do, utterly broken at the end of ourselves. And to be honest, I was pretty furious with my husband. I was like, this is probably your fault. I mean, I know I was on the leadership team too, but really you were the one running it. So what did you do wrong? What did I do wrong? I got it in the neck as well. I was taken to the side by a few people and lambasted. So what did I do wrong? What should we have done differently? And in the middle of that, I had a little amazing moment. I left a pile out of books that I wanted my husband to bring with me, and another pile of books which were to go into storage. And of course, he got the wrong ones. So I was left with quite a random concoction of books, and I was reading my way through one. I think at that point, we were in someone's seaside house for a couple of months. That's where we were there. And I was reading one of them, and a little footnote caught my eye. That's quite interesting. And back in 2011, it was when, if you did a Google search, Google Books would often give you a chapter.
Okay.
And so a chapter emerged of this book called Generation to Generation by a guy called Edwin Friedman. And I started to read it, and I kept reading it. And in this chapter, it explained everything that had just happened to us over the last 6 years.
Wow.
That's definitely a God moment. Just what you need.
Right book, wrong book. I think your husband had the right pile.
It was guided by an angel.
It was a case study of a church that where the leader had to step down, and it followed the pattern of what would happen to the next leader. And it predicted everything that happened to us. It predicted how long we would stay there for, and it predicted what would happen to the guy who came after us. And you know what? I watched that church, and the predictions absolutely came to pass. And so all of a sudden, I was reading this book thinking, why did I not know about this? You know, our whole job was about relationships, but no one had ever told me that below the surface of relationships, there's this dynamic that happens, particularly under times of pressure and confusion and loss and change, where people start reacting to each other in a way that builds and builds, where conflict emerges, where splits emerge, where people distance, where people become saviors, which was what happened to our best friend, effectively. It's a predictable outcome of a group under stress that doesn't know what to do. It looks for a savior. And our friend unconsciously took that role on and thought he was saving the church by starting a new one. I know I can sort out all these problems. John and Kathryn can't do that, but I can. And it wasn't actually, it showed me that we weren't to blame. We were naive. We could have done a lot of things a lot better. So hands up to that. But there was something bigger at work that was going on. It took the blame off of ourselves. It really helped me through my burnout and helped me through all of the self-doubt I had. But also it helped us begin to stop blaming others as well.
Yeah.
And so from 2011, when I discovered this, I was like, well, everyone needs to know about this.
Everybody needs to know about that, because you experienced it in the the very public space of a church. But I'm guessing you're going to share with us how this happens in families and all the relational breakdown issues in the workplace and so on.
Absolutely.
So what's this? Is this the Bowen system?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this was Bowen Systems that I discovered. And Friedman, the book that popped up on Google for me, was he was a rabbi who worked in New York in the 1980s. And he was the first person who took Bowen Systems, which was developed as a family systems theory, looking at the dynamics that happened in families. Bowen was one of the first family therapists back in the 1950s and 60s. Friedman then took that into congregational life. And realized, because he was a counselor, so he was working with individual families, but he was the one who realized, oh, look, this congregation is acting like a big family. But not in the lovely way we sometimes like to imagine church families, but in the messy, gritty, dirty way that families work. And he brought that in. And of course, people then went beyond him to look at organizations, and exactly the same principles happen in organizations. And so when you start to understand these dynamics, then you start to spot it everywhere. And I love it when I'm working with people, either I'm teaching them or they're my clients, and they'll go away and they'll come back and they'll be like, oh, did you see that on the news? And did you see the cutoff and the over functioning going on there? And you start to spot it. And then you start to be able to, rather than just automatically react to what people are doing around us, we get to start to choose our responses. And that's when relationships get transformed.
Oh,
absolutely.
Amazing. Gosh, what a journey and what a story. So how does that, what's the passion now? What's your focus of how you're focusing, targeting?
Yeah, because it sounds like you could have gone in multiple directions.
So many different
from
directions.
I feel like I kind of still am. I can't say that I love it when I look at your website, because your website is like, we know exactly what we're doing, and this is the thing that we're doing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still a bit like multitasking. But so I guess, so my heart is always about Bowen Systems, but I guess the way I unpack it now is two routes. So I am a clinician, so I see clients and I get a whole array of clients. I work with quite a lot of entrepreneurs, senior leaders, partners in law firm, bankers, that kind of thing, where relationships are actually incredibly important. Not only the relationships in the teams, but also your relationships with the people that you're working with, your clients. So I do quite a lot of work with them, particularly where the stress is very high, because that's where all these behaviors become most intense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when the pressure is high, and often there is a coming together, perhaps of personal stuff and professional stuff, all amalgamating into a messy mix. And I kind of love that mess. That's my happy place. So I work clinically with people who are burnt out, stressed, trying to work out what on earth is going on. But I also do the same in families. So I'm really excited at the moment, because there's a wonderful lady called Jenny Brown out in Australia who has brought Bowen Systems to Australia about 20 odd years ago. And she's just written the first parenting program based on Bowen Systems that I'm just bringing to the UK.
Oh,
so that's
amazing.
super exciting, because Bowen Systems can at times feel a little bit difficult to get your head round. And she's just identified the exact key parts that you need to know as a parent.
Mhm.
Because the way of thinking is systemic, when we change the way we are as parents, we can transform the health of our young people. And,
Mhm.
you know, we are surrounded at the moment in society where young people are really struggling. And so often we can focus on what do we need to do to help them? And we forget that actually when we work on who we are as parents, that's possibly the most powerful thing we can do to transform the mental health of our children. And John
So
and I know
powerful.
that because my one of my children has neurodiversity and has huge struggles. And we've had to really put that into practice. There's nothing like really having to dig deep yourself as parents, and to see that we've matured as parents and the quality of our parenting, but then to see the impact on our kids is really powerful.
Phenomenal.
So that's
Wait,
half my work. And then
was
the other half, oh yeah, go on.
just to unpack that just for a moment. What does that look like, transforming ourselves as parents to have a better impact on our children? What does that look like just in, I don't know, a short version of that? Because I'm guessing there's a whole lot to that.
Yeah. So at the core, it's what Bowen calls differentiation. Differentiation, and I'm still trying to get a really good, succinct definition of this. So this is my working definition at the moment. Differentiation is our capacity to be an individual, to be really clear thinking and thought through about our principles and our values and who we are, while remaining connected to others and inviting the same individuality from them so that we can be distinct together.
Okay.
Powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being able basically to hold myself as an individual while still being
Without disconnecting.
very connected to the people who matter. And that's
That's
so grown up, Kathryn.
And you know what? I don't know if I've got Jenny Brown's book close enough, but that's what she calls her book. She calls it Growing Yourself Up.
I need to meet Jenny, because one of the books that's kind of going around in my head, the title is Marriage is for Grown-Ups. And it's about this idea of taking personal responsibility for your own skills and how you turn up to the relationship so that you can be better together. Love it. Oh, so much we could talk about. Anyway, we
did cut you. That was one half.
That's half.
That was half. Then the other half is the fact that that actually when we come together and we all start reacting to each other, a team, whether it's a family team or a work team or a whole organization, takes on a life of its own. A little bit like I talked about that idea of one person becoming a savior on behalf of the whole team.
Yeah.
That wasn't just his idea. That's something that unconsciously the whole group enacts.
Yes.
And
their ego as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, this is the amazing dynamic of co-creation.
Right.
So what tends to happen is there is a meeting about our particular way that we tend to react in relationships under pressure and what the whole is seeking. So it tends to find a savior who's quite comfortable to be a savior.
Yeah.
So there's this amazing dynamic of co-creation, which is where we learn our maturity, because we realize that we have to take responsibility for our part. I love it when I work. I'm totally going off on one, but I'll come back to the other in a minute. But what I love is when I get, so I quite often have an individual coming to see me for therapy, but they will be complaining about their other half. And so they'll be like, oh, they're so intense. They won't give me any space. They just keep pursuing me. They keep going after me, and I'm feeling so suffocated. And I'll say to them, what do you do? And they go, oh, well, I've just got to get some breathing space. So I just like go into my own room, or I go to my man cave, or I just go for a walk. And I just say, okay, so what are we co-creating here? one person is pursuing, so the other person distances, so that creates more anxiety in this person. This one pursues more, creates more anxiety in this person, so this one distances. So we have this co-creation, and they look at me and they go, oh. And then, oh, so I can stop it. I go, yes. If you stop distancing, they start calming down, and all of a sudden you get to meet together rather than having a co-created enactment. So we're so empowered within this way of understanding relationships because we understand that everybody is reacting to each other. And when we stop reacting and we start being thoughtful about how we want to respond, then that ripples across everybody. And I guess that's the kind of work that I want to do in the Team Brain Partnership. So that is the idea that we really think about it as team. What are we doing in our teams that is creating this reactive? I sometimes call it throwing a hot potato. When I'm teaching, I get a ball and I start throwing it at people in the lecture hall. And I get them to throw it to each other, and they realise, especially when I tell them to throw it hard, that people start reacting more, don't you? Your bigger throws, you fall over. And so the team brain is all about the way that when we come together in a team, we start to adopt all of this unconscious behaviours. But if as a team, we can start understanding what we're doing and being more thoughtful collectively, particularly the leader is the most important person in this because it's a ripple effect that happens from the way the leader acts across the entire organisation, then we can transform situations. And I don't know how much you talk about psychological safety, but a lot of the work that I do, people are constantly talking about it. And what I am hoping that people will start to understand is that psychological safety is not static, it is dynamic. And what underpins psychological safety is the group's level of collective differentiation. The ability to keep calm under growing pressure. And individuals who are differentiated, teams who have a collective level of differentiation, that's when you experience psychological safety.
Yeah. And as you said, powerfully when the leader is able to do that, because of course they're the culture carriers. Oh, I love it.
I do. Just to unpack that a bit more, are there any examples that you're able to share of situations where you've gone in and let's take psychological safety as a case in point, where for whatever reason it just hasn't been good? Any examples that you're able to share of what's caused that and how they've been able to get through that? Because people are always looking for practical ways to get out of bad situations.
Yeah, dysfunctional teams, you can say exactly.
It. Yeah. And what I love working with is I love working with leaders who are able to step up and start making adjustments. So when I think about a good example, I guess I'm working with someone at the moment who's in a leadership position, a relatively large team, diverse team, and came to me burnt out, thinking about leaving their job, and absolutely furious with every lead member of all the different teams. And the journey has been to begin to understand the bigger picture of what's going on. So if I take one little example, one of their managers, she was just absolutely certain that this lady was just incompetent. She's just not pulling her weight. She's not doing a job. The job is really clear. She just hasn't been doing it for ages. This is ridiculous. I really need to start going through all the HR stuff. But because I'd sunk into it a little bit, and because I kind of get used to thinking systems rather than thinking individuals, so I try to step onto the balcony rather than being on the dance floor. What's the biggest picture we can take here? So I just said, well, she's done this job before and she's done this job before. I'm pretty certain she knows what she's doing. what if we were to hold a hypothesis, and I use a lot of hypotheses, what if we were to hold a hypothesis that actually she's really good at her job, but the change that is going on in the organization at the moment, who's going through quite a rapid change, so suddenly a lot more people employed, a lot more moving parts. If we were just to hold a hypothesis that perhaps change has actually been quite destabilizing, clarity of role has become mixed, people don't necessarily know who should be doing what, and therefore there are mixed messages, and people are a bit stressed out and therefore being more reactive. So rather than being able to have one of those curious conversations that you guys often talk about, they're a little bit more like correcting and a little bit more micromanaging, and all, because they're hotter, because they're more anxious, and so therefore they're less thoughtful and less present. So she's getting a lot more from a lot more different people. People are all hotter and more reactive. And what happens to us when we go there? Well, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. And our amygdala starts taking over. And so suddenly we start panicking. We can't think properly any longer. We can't make sure we've responded to all of those emails because actually our brain's gone offline. Well, if we hold that hypothesis, how would you engage with her differently?
Oh, brilliant question.
And so that is the type of work that I try and do. It's not that I know the answer. I'm not working in these organizations. I know a snapshot. But what I'm bringing is, okay, how might we think differently about this? What might you do differently? And her whole approach transformed. And the next time I spoke to her, I think she might have bought her a bunch of flowers. She was like, right, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to move towards, a little bit like that distancing and pursuing. She was kind of going in for the attack. And actually she was like, okay, no, I'm going to hold a hypothesis that actually there's just a lot going on for her right now. I'm going to calm things down, contain the anxiety, offer the warmth, offer the connection, offer the trust again, and let's see what happens. And in fact, when we came back the next time, we didn't even need to talk about it. She was like, oh, yeah, no, it's fine now.
All sorted.
Okay, great.
I love that idea of holding the hypothesis. I mean, we talk about thinking the best and recognizing that what you can see is not necessarily the whole situation. There's all sorts of things going on around. It could be things in their life. As you're rightly pointing out here, it's just the whole system, the organizational change they're going through. What could be causing that to happen?
What I love about this, and maybe it's a conversation we have another time, but I think in general, leaders, the way we think about people needs to change. So what you described on that individual, team, the team member to team member or boss to employee level, what would be different if I thought differently about them and how they ended up turning up differently. I think as organizations, we need to think very differently about people. And I'm pursuing this idea of it's not about managing performance anymore. It's about elevating and releasing potential. What if the hypothesis we held was with more warmth and with more connection and with more trust? So I think there's a whole lot of work there to be done, Kathryn, with this changing the direction of thinking and moving towards rather than away from, or oh, you're going to get me going off on one now, but I could just see the application on a whole organizational level.
And I think what's so hard at the moment is because the environment that we live in is so intense and stressful. And I can never say it properly, that VUCA, or what is it, volatile, uncertain, I can never pronounce it correctly. But we've got all of that going on, and that makes relationships so much harder. But if we know that actually, as the heat gets up, we all become more reactive, then do you know what? I'm more likely to cut someone some slack. When they go into, especially when we know our default modes. So I'm a classic overfunctioner. I often meet people who are burnt out and overfunctioners. And the problem with an overfunctioner is that at the moment when we are close to burnout and we need to look after ourselves and we need to delegate and we need to step back, an overfunctioner calms their anxiety by doing more.
Yeah.
And so just at the moment I'm utterly exhausted, I find myself compulsively doing more things.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone knows that about me, when my husband knows, rather than saying, stop doing so much, when he's like, oh, okay, you've gone into overfunctioning mode.
Know what's going on here. Yeah.
And rather than reacting to me, sort yourself out. Actually just goes, okay, and now I see where we are. And he can just observe me, or I can see, oh, okay, right, that's where we are. When we can just observe and accept, we don't increase the intensity by reacting to the other person. We can still keep connecting. And that allows the other person, like we were talking earlier about being mature and responsible for ourselves, it allows me then to sit and think, oh yeah, I've gone into my overfunctioning.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
I need to be a grown up about this and just calm myself down again.
Yeah.
And so what could become heightened conflict, actually, we can start lowering it down. And within teams, the reason this is so important is so often we have a real difficult problem to solve. I call them adaptive problems. That's not my term, but I can't remember the name of the person who came up with the term. I've got their book. Linsky came up with the term adaptive problems. They're fantastic. But it's a problem where it's not a clear solution. There's not one solution. There are many potential solutions, and we're going to have to try them out and experiment with them.
Right.
It's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable process, and it probably involves loss and grief and change and uncertainty. And so they're big, difficult problems to solve, and we need everyone to think together. But so often the problem gets lost in the relationship reactivity.
Yeah.
When we can calm the reactivity, then we don't lose the problem to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to sit there and stay with it and try and find a creative solution together. So many of the problems we face in the world now are really tricky adaptive problems. And we all need to get really good at the relationship bit so we don't miss these really tricky questions that we have to try and find an answer to.
Yeah. You know, we were just talking about this yesterday, talking about the drivers of change in organizations that are taking us to this place where we have to become so competent with our relationship skills to be able to do what you've described, to calm ourselves down, to hold that space where we can be more creative and innovative in our thoughts rather than defensive or trying to prove how clever we are or trying to, you know, be the one with the ideas to get the promotion. You know, it's all that stuff going on because of the fear of the change. Oh, this is so good, Kathryn.
And that's where the name team brain came from. Right. Because what we observe in teams is exactly the same behaviors as happens in our own individual brain. We have an individual amygdala that reacts to threat. We have a prefrontal cortex, which we need to think and solve problems. We have an emotional brain, and we have a connected social brain. And the whole team goes into that fight or flight, collective fight or flight, so panicky and so overwhelmed that its prefrontal cortex goes offline and it can't think and it can't be creative and it can't solve problems. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's where that whole concept of the team brain came from, is because we all need to learn, not only individually take responsibility for our bit, but also realize that the whole thing happens at a team level. And we've got to get skilled up to enable us to do that kind of quality of work.
And skilled up very quickly, because as you know, the passion that drives our work is that we're not really taught to do relationships well anyway. And now, that's not just on the individual level or couple level, family level. Now, organizationally, not only do we need to know how to do relationships well, but we need to take it up a few notches for the organization to survive.
What I'm finding fascinating is taking the concept of the individual level up to a team level. Certainly one of our early learnings was one individual would do something wrong, the other person would react, and then the first person would react.
You're pointing at me. You can go ahead. You can.
All right. The second person would then, the whole issue would be about the reaction rather than the initial trigger. So you're now into a completely different space, and I'm just trying to process that and take that up to a team level. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I can put my hand up and say, yeah, we'll end up arguing. So I'll do something that upsets John. He'll react in a way that I think is way over dramatic. And his reaction becomes the problem, not what caused it in the first place. Yeah.
And what's fascinating about Bowen Systems is he maps it. He gives us the skills to be able to map that. Because do you know what happens? That happens across a family and it happens across a team. So let me tell you, when my daughter was 3, she turned to me one day and she goes, "Mummy, when you're angry, you get annoyed at Daddy. And Daddy gets annoyed at Zach, who's her older brother. Zach gets annoyed at me. And then I get angry at you."
Oh, wow.
Full circle.
And I looked at her and I go, yes.
You're right. 3-year-old psychologist.
And that is the flow of the reactivity across the system.
Yeah.
And every system, whether it's a family or whether it's a team, gets its particular way of passing the stress around. And what I love about Bowen Systems is, well, not only can you map it, because I bet if I was to say to you, okay, how does it flow? You could probably tell me exactly what you guys would do and, incorporate other family members or whatever in the picture. But what I love about Bowen Systems is he says, okay, well, just try and mix it up a bit, because actually a family becomes symptomatic, which can mean an individual member getting sick because of the intensity of the flow of anxiety around the system. Can make an individual sick, which is the principle of parent coaching. A child can end up becoming symptomatic and sick because of the stress in the family system. That's why it's so important to address it. But Bowen says, okay, well, the key thing is about how rigid your flow of anxiety is. So just mix it up a bit. So I'll be like, okay, next time I'll just get angry at you first.
Okay.
So we don't have to suddenly become perfect people. This flow of reactivity across the system is what we do as humans. What I propose, I'm kind of developing kind of the theory about it, but what I'm proposing as I'm kind of writing at the moment is it's a little bit like you see a zebra on a savanna plain. One zebra in a whole herd sees the lion, but instinctively all the zebras pick up that fear and they all escape as one. We have always been team animals. We never did survival as individual cave people in our own different caves. We were always together. So that reactivity, that ability we have to pick up other people's stress, I would suggest is our core survival behavior. When one of us saw the saber-toothed tiger, we could all flee because we picked it up immediately. So we need that reactivity. It's part of our embodied social brain. But what we need to do is we need to just be able to be a little bit more mature and a little bit wiser in the way that we use it. So we're not telling anybody, well, you've just got to be Bowen, and actually it was Friedman, talked about being a non-anxious presence. And nowadays, most of us just say, just be a slightly less anxious presence than everybody else in the room. We're not trying to be perfect, but we're just trying to improve a little bit, take responsibility for our part. And it is amazing the difference that even a very small change can make, not only in your own life and your own levels of stress, but also in the whole well-being of your families and your workplace teams.
Oh,
all connected.
100%. That is just, we were going to ask you what's one thing that you would offer as advice for relationships, and I think that's a brilliant place to start. Firstly, is just be a little less anxious than everybody else, or certainly not
There's just so much anxiety out there.
Well, that's the thing, somebody was using this great metaphor of the stress cup, that for all of us, our stress cup is so full already that the least little thing can push us over into some kind of dysfunctional behavior
Yeah.
because we've been triggered or pushed because our stress levels are so high. So just learning how to be a little less anxious or to help others to, come down a notch and not react can be a huge step forward, and definitely something leaders need to master for the time that we're in now. But what else would you suggest as great advice for leaders, for teams, for organizations dealing with everybody having a full stress cup right now?
And because before I answer you, the wonderful thing about the stress cup analogy is what we're trying to think about together is about the fact that so often the stress cup is seen as an individual. Again, it's about me and my stress level and how's my body feeling. But what we're talking about is how the social brain shares the anxiety and the fact that we pass our stress and anxiety on to other people as a collective way of trying to manage our stress. And therefore, it's not only about trying to calm our own self internally, but catching ourselves before we pass on the stress to other people.
Right.
I teach, one of the core things I teach, and one of the most important elements of Bowen Systems that I teach to my students is triangles. So a two-person relationship is always unstable. So like you guys together, someone will do something that's slightly irritating and so almost unconsciously we pull somebody else in. Oh, I'll just talk to so-and-so about it. Oh, I'll just complain, or I'll just do this. And that's how we pass stress around the system. We just hook somebody else in. Especially in leadership roles, it can become very seductive sometimes. Oh, will you help solve this problem for me?
Yes.
We like being a problem solver. We're like, okay. But actually, the work that I do with leaders is like, you're not solving anything because this is not your problem. All you are doing is receiving the stress from other people and getting dumped on. They feel better because they pass the stress over to you. You feel weighed down and overwhelmed because you can't actually solve it, and the problem remains there just festering away to emerge another day. Anyway, that's a little side bit about triangles. But I think the piece of advice I was thinking about was about, and it is, we've kind of touched on it already, but it is a lovely little comment that one of my Bowen coaches gave me, a wonderful lady called Kathryn Wiseman out in the States. And I was talking to her about teams because she knew I was thinking about this team brain stuff. And I was trying to, how do we bring Bowen Systems to teams? I said, okay, what's really important for teams to know about how to really work well together? And she gave me the most annoying advice because she didn't answer it at all. She goes, be a self first and then put it together.
Ooh.
That actually, when we work on our level of differentiation, which is what we're talking about, when we work on what we bring to relationships, that is what creates really strong relationships.
We're so with you on that page.
Absolutely.
Because we still question in this 21st century, 2024, why are we not being taught how to own ourselves and be responsible for our own behavior so that we can turn out better to relationships? Why? So
but
I love
picking
that.
up on that point there was a marriage coach that we spoke with recently, and she was saying the same thing, sharing, I can't remember if it was during the episode or prior to it, but
Which one?
A number of people that she works with or talks to will come in saying, yes, problem on the other side, all the problems all around me. Sit down, have a conversation with themselves, and actually realize, actually, maybe there's some things internally, you're the common factor here, some things that you might want to take responsibility for, be yourself first, and then things can improve from there. So.
And I love it. I had a lovely comment from a client who was just finishing recently, and she said to me, I thought when I was coming for therapy, I was just going to get to vent at you about how annoyed I was about my husband. And she goes, it's been completely different as you've showed me my role in the co-creation. She, not only have I realized my part in it, but because of that, I can do something about it.
Yeah.
It's
So
really empowering.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we see all of this stuff and we're like, well, what can I do? When we realize that actually we have the power to transform situations in the way we are, the way we think, the way we process our feelings, the way we commit to other people and relate to other people, that can be transformative. That's really freeing and really empowering.
That's so amazing. You know, Kathryn, I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing we're running out, but there's so many other things I'd love to discuss. Maybe I'll plant a seed. Probably, I don't know if your work will take you in this direction, but there are light bulbs going off even around the inclusion conversation and relationship dynamics that have been created because of history and how those play off against each other in this attempt to become more inclusive because of the system that we're a part of. Would love to have that conversation with you as well. So I thought I just drop that in there to plant the seed or something else to think about how we can use systems theory to help unlock that. But it's been such a joy, and we see the passion just pouring out, and wish you all the very best in this important work you're doing with the team brain. How can people
there you go, I was just going to ask,
get in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. So I've got a couple of websites. One is my kind of clinical head, which is Dr. Kathryn Kissell, which is great because no one else in the country has my name. So as long as you can spell it, you're going to find me. And then the other website is the Team Brain Partnership. So yeah, both of those. I'm on LinkedIn, so do connect via LinkedIn. That would be wonderful. And yeah, my contact details, but probably easiest at the moment through Dr. Kathryn Kissell.
All right,
Reach out either through the website or the email is on the website, and just send me an email and I would love to chat.
We will put those links in the show notes so people have all the correct spellings and can find you there.
Yeah, that is true. My spelling is awkward.
We'll put that there, but amazing.
It has been such a joy.
Yeah, any final thoughts, anything that maybe you wanted to say that we didn't get to cover just as we wrap up? Any final thoughts you wanted to share? No pressure, just an opportunity.
We're already given so much gold.
I know.
No, I think it's been a wonderful conversation, and I think it's just lovely to sit and reflect together on that we take relationships for granted.
Yeah.
They just happen, and we think we're over here doing this stuff, and relationships we don't think about, but actually relationships are the ground that we walk upon.
Love that.
And the more we can realize that, then the more empowered we are to do everything else that we want to achieve in our lives.
Yeah. Pay attention. I love that.
That says it well.
Do the relationship bit, and that's the foundation for the rest of life. Totally. It's been amazing. Look forward to the next conversation.
I hope we can have you back. Exactly.
Oh, I'd love it. It would be a delight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we say goodbye to our guests around the world, wherever they are. It's been wonderful.
And look forward to the next one.
Look forward to the next one.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.